The history of this area is, this is one of the original huge avocado groves, mostly Hass avocado, and the whole hill was covered with Hass. In 2013, when there was a drought in California, most of the owners turned off their avocado groves. This farm had been transitioning from 2008 to 2013 into dragon fruit. So they basically had started inquiring about dragon fruit. There was Pitahaya Festival in 2008. They had started just buying, there wasn't a lot of dragon fruit anywhere, but they started buying what was available and playing with it. And then in 2013, 2014, the University of California small farm division with Romero Lobo basically asked some farms, would you be interested in really producing dragon fruit? And so this farm became one of those farms where they took out most of the avocado grove and replaced it with dragon fruit. All of the dragon fruit here was propagated from cuttings. There was some that was produced from seed, and it was all from, not all, but the majority of the plants are from Elk Grove, where their plants came from Paul Thompson and Leo Manuel.
Okay.
And so these are, it's super interesting because these are really the original hybrids.
Wow.
And so what they used to do is when they would grow out a hybrid, they would grow out seedlings, and you would end up with a bunch of different seedlings, and they would be trading them around and saying this one is going to stick. And even Gray Martin was in on this, and they would say, oh, here, try this one, let me see how this one grows. So not all of the plant material was labeled correctly, and then a lot just became in a general. So PG might have a bunch of siblings, but it became PG.
Okay.
And American Beauty became AB,
Right.
but there might be a bunch of siblings out there. So when I took over the ranch in 2018, Julio had been here Julio planted this out and had worked for Mr. Wallace. And so Julio just said, oh, this is an AB, and this is a PG, and this is a whatever. And then what we ended up finding, when pack room stuff comes into the pack room, I'm like, okay, when I was learning the fruit, what is this?
Yeah.
That's a PG. I was like, what is this? That's a PG.
And they're different looking.
And they look different.
Yeah.
Now they tasted the same.
Okay.
So very small nuance that most palates would never be able to pick up, but they look different. And so it took a few years, and then Paul Erickson, who runs Rare Dragon Fruit, he and I became friends. He came here for his first Pitahaya Festival in 2019, and so we were always communicating, and he got into really trying to get the history of the hybrids of dragon fruit. And so through his work and through what I was observing here, we finally figured out that it was kind of messed up, and that you couldn't pigeonhole everything into one thing. You had to just kind of step back and say we're in general categories. And so we have all of Thompson's fruit here, and so we call ourselves a Thompson Farm, even though we do have some other stuff here. But we focus on high flavor profile. We focus on magenta a lot because that tends to be high flavor profile.
Right, that's good stuff.
Yeah, and we don't mess around with, we're production farm, so you also have to just pick and choose your direction, and you can adjust that, but we don't fiddle around with a lot of the specialty hybrids that are being made today. A lot of those are cool things, but they're not production things. A lot of those are cool things, but they're not flavorful things.
Right.
And so a lot of people will say, oh, do you have this? And we don't have time for that.
Right.
When we go, we will have 10,000 pound pick weeks, and it's just go time. There's no, and that was why we find things all the time, but because we aren't eating our fruit, we aren't cutting it open. So I started being the cutter of any fruit that was damaged, and that's how we started finding different things. And I would say, oh, why is this white inside when this is supposed to be red inside? And, we just found that we had a bunch of different hybrids or siblings and stuff. So anyway, so Wallace Ranch is 15 acres. It goes all the way up past there, and it goes inside. Our original groves are inside, which we'll go take a look at. And then we also, what you're going to see here is there were no farms. There were no production farms in the United States when this farm started. So there was no right way of doing anything.
Okay.
So everything here was trial and error. And so we have a lot of the errors that were made. And we have to live with some of that. We try to get out of it, but it's between expense and labor, it's pretty difficult to just change,
Sure.
6,000 trellises.
Sure.
We committed for trellis systems. I feel like that's the most important thing in growing dragon fruit. There's not a right trellis. There's not a best trellis. There are better trellises. There are definitely wrong trellises.
Yeah.
What we focused on was what we felt was the most applicable to how the farm was set up and what we could adjust to. So if you kind of look out in this field, you see there's brown posting. And if you look beyond the brown posting, you see gray posts.
Yeah.
So this farm started off on 8-foot by 4-foot wood posts. In order to be certified organic, you would not be able to have a treated lumber post.
Okay.
And so they wanted to make the outer lots. The inner lot had been placed on some treated lumber posts, but they wanted to make the outer lot on non-treated. The problem with non-treated lumber is it rots. And the spitter, our water line, goes fairly close to the wood, so
Yeah.
that's always moist under
Right.
the soil. And so when I came, basically these wood posts have about a 3-year life before they start rotting. So they had started rotting. And if we have a big windstorm, we have a 250-pound plant
Right.
on a post that's rotted at the base, the
Right.
wind blows it over, and now our mature plant that just got to production
Yeah.
goes down. So our solution was we had to figure out a posting that would be appropriate for organic, and we had to find a solution for the longevity of the plant. So we went with concrete. Our original posts were 4 by 8-foot posting with 2 rebar crossbars to act as the cross. And we still stick with that. It's an expensive proposition now that costs have gone up. It was reasonable when we started, but that's since has doubled. So with labor to create that post with materials and labor is now almost $20 a post.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of time.
Yeah.
And the posts are 90 pounds. We still make them. We have reduced the weight of the post. We took a foot off. So we are 7 foot, we sink 3 feet. So we like the 4-foot height. And the reason why we like the 4-foot height is because the plant will grow 2 feet above. That's just a natural kind of lift to the plant. So your top of your plant is still at 6 feet, and most of my guys are going to be in their 5. They're 5 feet, or some of them are even under 5 feet. And so we don't want people on ladders. You can see that we're on hills.
Right.
So that to us, getting the 4-foot was at least most of the plant mass would be here. We can take a brush and pollinate up there, and somebody could probably reach if there were fruit up there. So when you walk around, you're going to see a lot of different trellis systems. That's what we have ended up with.
Okay.
Is the posting. So we can see that inside. And then
I know when we were in Lahaina at the farm out there, they were concrete postings. They were
yeah.
using.
Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense with weather and
Yeah.
all of that. You have to make a decision. So I know Eyal he did the wire trellis, and we actually were taking that concept and trying to figure out how to run between our posting that concept. So a neighbor of mine who, they just have a teeny little setup, they started off of our plants, they have fiddled with that as well. And so there is I've seen some stuff that they've done that I've liked, but they've left that posting because the 90-pound post was killing Chris's back, and Chris is like 6'4" and a fireman.
Yeah.
And so it just really tells you, like, you have to if you commit to posting, and he only has a couple hundred plants.
Yeah.
So it is something. What we're doing right now is we're actually going back to our old posts, the brown posts, and we're actually cutting off the bottom right now, and we're actually repurposing those back into the soil because of a cost, and just trying to get our plants. We couldn't keep up with the plants that were falling.
Okay.
And so we just need our plants up. Otherwise we end up with ant issues. Snail issues have been prolific this year. So, so anyway, so
That's a good thing about Vegas. We don't get snails.
Yeah, we didn't get stales till this year, so don't ever say you don't get them. Let me tell you. So anyway, so that's that. So we're kind of walk those a little bit. If you look up here in this corner, you see brown around the posts. So our old groves they're very challenging to maintain because once a dragon fruit plant is happy rooted, it grows prolifically, especially the Guatemalan hybrids. And so the challenge that we have beyond the posting is plant management. Because we just did that whole section up there. We spent a lot of labor hours, cleaning that up, trimming, posting, and in 6 weeks it looked like we hadn't touched it. The plants are, unruly. The hurricane hit, the plants went down. But that section yesterday, we have a friend, her husband has been helping us, and so he comes once a week and he redid that section, and he did this whole section. So we wanted him to go back and see in just 6 weeks how much work there is to be done in just that area. And so he was really surprised at the end of yesterday. He said, I had these plants where I thought they were great, and he said, I can't believe how much plant material I took off of them, and a couple have died and a couple have fallen over, and there was fertilizer, and we have plants in a real bucket, but we make a bucket in the ground if they're directly in the ground. And he said there was nothing left in there. And so we just, for the winter, what we've decided is we are going to pre-trim the plants, which we didn't do last year, and we are putting in chicken compost mulch around them, and just trying to get some nutrition in if we get a wet winter. That'll just kind of be there already, and then we will reapply fertilizer next spring, and on top of that we put the chicken compost mulch. So we did, because this season was very wet. It was a really tough season from a standpoint that the plants woke up late. Between the snails and the wet, we had a lot of fruit damage, and our volume was significantly down from last year. So we decided, because we knew it wasn't worth applying fertilizer and having a late crop if we're going to continue being wet, because we're just banging our heads against the wall. So when we apply a fertilizer, it can be $4,000 to $6,000. And so we only applied one fertilizer this year. And you could say, well, that's why our crop was down. And I could say yes, but it's just not worth extending this season.
Right.
We would rather spend that money getting the plants right, putting them to bed, and saying, let's have a great season next year. And the plants ran really hard last year, so it also wasn't, they ran hard for everybody last year, for Gray, for Kevin, for Eyal. And this year they were definitely, mellow. So I'd say the plants are probably smarter than we are. They knew, they knew last year was good, and then they probably knew that this weather was coming, and so, they did what they did. We had, the fruit tasted really good this year.
I thought so. Thank you for
yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. You guys, we have some. We can try some more. But the fruit tasted good this year. Last year, our first 3/4 of the season was the best tasting fruit we've ever had.
Wow.
The last quarter was after the heat wave in September, and I would say the tail end was good, but that 2-week period in September, which was a lot of our fruit, the heat just didn't. The fruit couldn't handle that heat. And it wasn't the heat, it was when the heat hit. So the heat hit at day 30. So the fruit was in this development mode, but it just hadn't quite gotten there, and yet then it thought it was there. And so basically the skin turned as though it were ripe, and the inside wasn't developed. And that was a really interesting thing to see. So this year we have the skin not coming to development, but the inside is developed. That's a really weird
changed
thing.
me up.
And we cover, you're seeing it inside too. You can see the black bags down there, but there's every fruit we cover or we try to, if we, if it's out of control amount of fruit, we can't. But we try to cover every fruit, and the bags are acting as like serious shade cloth right now. So we think that's part of the issue that's happening. We're cold, and then they have shade cloth on them, so they're just not getting the whole UV thing happening.
Is the cool kind of coming early here for you? Because it is for us in Vegas, I think.
We've been cool. Even when we had heat, we didn't have sustained heat. We had like moments that were good, but we were so late coming into heat, and then really since that hurricane rain, we've been this up and down, which is normally, I feel like we're in spring weather right now versus.
Well, that's kind of where we've been. It was up until, last week it was 90, and then this week it's 70. We just skipped over the 80s entirely. And we're just in the 70s, and we're going down to like high 40s, low 50s at night.
Wow, at night, yeah.
So it's just all of a sudden just hit like that, and sometimes it does that in Vegas. Just skips it skips a season.
Yeah.
Which last year we went in maybe halfway through November, maybe before it really started getting cold.
Got it. Yeah.
And so everything was still growing and great, and I didn't even cover anything until the end of November, around Thanksgiving time.
Gotcha. Yeah, it'll be interesting. We'll see if we had a little blip of a heat wave, and then we went down again. So I feel like it's more spring weather, because we like that in the spring.
And we had
and
July.
Plants like pop a few buds.
We had that bad July, so whatever didn't burn off, once it cooled down, and they just took off.
Yeah.
And everything's thriving right now.
Yeah.
It's just that July was so rough for everybody. Wow. I know in Arizona I was seeing the whole people lost all their plants because they had like 30 days over 110 in a row. Vegas is about like that. We got up to like 120 a couple of times.
Oh, that's rough.
Yeah,
that's hard.
Like
that's
the
really
Robles
hard.
I had these big beautiful branches that were coming out of it,
and they just got fried.
And they got fried.
Were they under shade? They were under shade.
They were, they were under shade, and then I took it off for a day while I built the structure. We put with what is that, conduit?
Yeah.
And just in that time, I got the shade back on it, and that was all it took. And the cuttings themselves are fine.
Yeah.
It's that new growth that came out.
Yeah.
And right now, actually, it's kind of burned, and I just took off the parts that I let them dry up.
Yeah, just leave it. Yeah.
And so I have all these weird shaped branches, and they're popping pups out everywhere. Yeah. So they're popping pups out everywhere now.
Yeah. Good. Yeah, a lot of times people will see frost and sunburn act the same, and so people see that and they freak out. I did my first year, and so they want to cut it off and stuff. I just tell people, just leave it. Just leave it and see what happens, because ultimately, if you want new branches, you get that. If you want to cut that later, you can, but you have growth coming, which you can utilize for something, So our plants don't look the prettiest. Some people really care about the aesthetics of their plants. Our plants produce a ton of fruit, and big fruits and delicious fruits, but I kind of got over that.
And this is kind of how I am in Vegas. I'm like, it's Vegas. This is what they look like when you grow them in Vegas. They have brown spots on them that are dried off, and they look funny because I have a ton of two-sided growth. Yeah. Tons and tons of two-sided growth.
What's the cause of the two-sided growth?
I don't know. I'd like to figure that out, because I don't know if it's something with our area or something with that's making them do that. But I have one that's two-sided, and then it came out with 4 sides. It's still flat in the back.
So crazy.
It's just I got some really crazy looking stuff.
That's so funny. We saw two-sided this year too. We also just noticed. We were just talking about this. There's allegedly a male fruit. There is a theory, I think it came out of the Philippines, with the Filipino farmers, that there's male and female flowers, and that there is a male fruit. And the male fruit has just like 2 bracts. It's like more skin than bract. And we had a lot of those this year. And so we were just talking about that, is if it, in theory, is a male fruit. We had a lot of those this year. Yeah. And so we don't know why. The other thing we had, which we did see at the end of last season through the winter, through this year, is we had what we call dragons. And we had a lot of those. Now, you never know if it's a fertilizer issue, but I'm wondering if it was this whole weather thing. The plants just get so confused. But the dragon is when either the bud pops out and then turns to a branch. So it's supposed to be a flower, but it turns to a branch, and so as this kind of scaly dragon.
I got that on the sugar dragon you sent me.
You did?
Yeah. it came out, so it looks like it was going to be a bud, and then it just kind of all morphed into three-sided branch.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if I've seen it on sugar dragon, but yeah. And then your other would be that your branch turns into a fruit, which we have one in the pack room today. I was like, oh, look, a dragon. So that's what we call dragons. We don't know why, but we saw it was very prevalent. So,
Awesome.
so anyway, so let's go inside.